Fish stew.
Just a little more seasoning and it will be perfect.
San Francisco, late 1800s. Italian fishermen heading out before sunrise. All hopeful, thinking, tonight we're eating like kings. But then there's always that one poor guy who comes back with empty nets. Nothing. No fish. Now today, if you come back with nothing, you just hit up DoorDash. Back then, nope. But there was this genius tradition. Instead of sulking, the unlucky fisherman would grab a pot and walk around like, hey, you got something for me? And the others, instead of roasting him, would actually toss in scraps. One dude drops a clam. Another gives up a mussel. Somebody throws in a fishtail or a lonely shrimp. By the end, that unlucky guy would have got some sort of a stew. Honestly, it's like the original potluck, except everybody smelled like the ocean. That little survival hack, it eventually turned into a recipe. After the 1906 San Francisco earthquake destroyed most of the city, they actually printed fish stew in a fundraiser cookbook to help the survivors. A dish that started as, sorry bro, here's a clam, became comfort food for people who literally lost everything. Now jump back into Red Dead Redemption 2. You want to taste this little piece of history? Head to the Old Light Saloon in Van Horn, New Hanover. It'll set you back $3. But if you think it's a good deal, then you need to remember that it was back in the 1800s, which is about $77 today. So yeah, Arthur Morgan might slurp it up, but an average working cowboy of that time would probably just chew some jerky and keep walking. Crazy, right? Makes you wonder, what's today's struggle food gonna cost 100 years from now? Probably ramen noodles for like $80. Lamb heart. So if you've walked into the Old Light Saloon in Van Horn, you've probably noticed this one sitting on the menu. Lamb heart with boiled cabbage. Yeah, $5, which is like dropping over $128 today just to chew on a heart. Arthur Morgan can throw that cash around after a bounty, but me? I'd be looking at the cheapest whiskey on the shelf and calling it dinner. Back then, lamb heart wasn't weird. It wasn't some survival food. This was actually fancy. In England during the 1800s, they even gave it a nickname. They called it love in disguise. Yeah, someone thought serving up an actual animal heart was romantic. I don't know, maybe they were sick. Or maybe Valentine's Day was just built different back then. And it goes back even further, way before Red Dead's timeline. In 1769, a cookbook called The Experienced English Housekeeper by Elizabeth Raffald had a recipe for making a dish out of a beast's heart. Didn't have to be lamb, could be cow, pig, whatever heart you had lying around. So why's it in RDR2? Well, I'm guessing Rockstar saw the whole love in disguise thing and thought, yeah, let's feed that to the outlaws. Makes sense. It's dark, it's weird, it's perfect for Van Horn. And honestly, knowing that history doesn't really make me hungrier. Like, sure, back then dropping a heart on the table meant, I love you. But if somebody served me lamb heart today, I'd probably just ask for the check and ride out of town to Saint Denis to try our next meal. Lobster Bisque.
This lobster bisque is good.
All right, grab a chair in the Bastille Saloon in Saint Denis, flip open the menu, and there it is. Lobster Bisque. $3. Not a bad deal, right? Arthur Morgan spends more than that on ammo without blinking. But lobster wasn't always this luxury stuff. Back in the day, it was basically the cockroach of the ocean. And they would call it this, cockroach of the ocean. I'm not kidding. People hated it. It was so common on the northeast coast that pilgrims were embarrassed to serve it to guests. Like, imagine you're hosting a dinner party and you're like, sorry fellas, all I got is ocean bugs again. Lobster was so cheap, they fed it to cats. They spread it on fields as fertilizer. Tell me, would you eat something your cat eats? Yeah, me neither. But the 1800s flipped everything upside down. Railroads and refrigeration came along, which means lobster could travel inland, stay fresh, and show up in cities where people had never seen it before. So these train passengers tried lobster for the first time and thought, whoa, this is exotic. This is fancy. And just like that, the switch flipped. Poor man's food became rich man's delicacy. By the late 1800s, lobster was all over elegant restaurants in New York and Boston. Wealthy folks sitting around with wine glasses, acting like they weren't eating the same thing pilgrims once shoveled into gardens. So the next time you're sipping lobster bisque in Saint Denis, remember, your outlaw is basically eating what used to be cat food. But yeah, if rich people said it was fancy, guess that makes Arthur Morgan fancy too.
Prime rib.
Back in the day, it was royal food. Literally, British royal courts would serve prime rib as the centerpiece of their massive feasts. The cut itself, it comes from ribs 6 through 12, basically the sweet spot of the animal. Not cheap, not rough cowboy food. This was the kind of dish you brought out when you wanted to flex. In the UK, especially in the late 1800s, prime rib were the star of the Sunday roast. Whole families would gather around, slice it up, pass the potatoes. In Canada too, it was a holiday staple. Christmas, Thanksgiving, even family milestones. And to this day, April 27th is actually National Prime Rib Day. So yeah, that cow didn't die in vain. Now, swing over to Red Dead Redemption 2. You roll into the Bastille Saloon in Saint-Denis, and what's on the menu? Prime rib with potatoes dauphinoise and a spring salad. Price tag? $5. So if you're ordering this in-game, you're not just eating, you're basically cosplaying royalty. That's a king's feast sitting in your outlaw's belly. Cracked wheat and milk. Now, for the next meal, I want you to get your player to Rhodes Parlor House. Sit down, check the menu, and there it is. Cracked wheat and milk. $3. Now I know what you're thinking. That doesn't sound like saloon food. That sounds like something your grandma made when the fridge was empty. But again, don't let the plain name fool you. This dish has history. And I mean deep history. We're not talking 1800s cowboy history here. We're talking 4000 BC. Yeah, this is basically one of the oldest meals in human history. Some sources even say 6000 BC. The Babylonians, the Hittites, the Hebrews, they were all cooking up versions of this cracked wheat. The Romans, Arabs, Egyptians, they all had it on record by 1000 BC. So while Arthur Morgan is chewing on it in Rhodes, somewhere, some historian is smiling, going, "Yup, same stuff they ate before pyramids even had pointy tops." And it wasn't just a Middle Eastern thing either. Over time, cracked wheat worked its way into Ukrainian and Central Asian kitchens. And then Rockstar, they slid this meal into Red Dead as if it's just some filler food. But what you're actually buying for $3, that's a taste of something humans have been eating for thousands of years. And I think that makes it the most OP dish in the whole game.
Fried catfish.
Now, for the next meal, we have to rewind back to the year 1860, London. The very first fish and chips shop opens up. Crispy battered fish, hot oil, golden potato slices. Boom. Instant hit. The working class went nuts for it. By the late 1920s, there were 35,000 fish and chip shops across the UK. That's not a food trend, that's an invasion. During both World Wars, fish and chips were exempt from rationing. So while people were cutting corners on meat, sugar, butter, fried fish kept flowing. That's how essential it became. But the story goes back even further. Jewish immigrants from Spain and Portugal brought over the tradition of battering and frying fish in oil. That's the DNA of every crispy fillet you've ever eaten. Now, the United States gave it its own spin. The Northeast and Midwest made it a Friday fish fry tradition. Down south, catfish stole the spotlight. Throw in some greens, add boiled beans on the side, and suddenly you've got a plate that feels like home cooking, with grease on top. And that's exactly what Rockstar dropped into Red Dead Redemption 2. You walk into the Rhodes Parlor House in Rhodes, Lemoyne, flip to the menu, and there it is, fried catfish with greens and boiled beans. Price, $5, which was serious money in the 1800s. But yup, if you've been riding through Lemoyne swamps all day, dodging bounty hunters and alligators, tell me you wouldn't blow your cash on a hot plate of fried fish. I know half of you would order it twice, then complain when Arthur got too heavy to sprint. Beef stew.
Hot and warm beef stew for Arthur.
Now, if you roll into Valentine and step inside Smithfield's saloon, there you will find beef stew staring you down. On the menu, beef stew. The ancient Romans were slow cooking beef way back, simmering it in wine, spices, even raisins. They called it coppadia, basically the Roman version of comfort food. The Vikings? They'd throw meat, beans, and ground bark into hot water over coals to make it. Even the Old Testament mentions people eating stewed meat. But the beef stew we recognize today, that really took shape in the 14th century France. A royal chef named Taillevent put it into print, and once it hit the page, it never left the kitchen. So when you're in Valentine paying $3 for stew, you're eating something with roots older than gunpowder, older than saloons, older than the West itself. Lamb fries.
This lamb fry is awesome.
First of all, let me tell you about one of the strangest frontier traditions. Late 19th century, the mining boom hits the West. Basque immigrants flood in, chasing gold. But when that didn't pan out, a lot of them turned to herding sheep instead. Now, here's where it gets gnarly. When it came time to castrate rams, some ranchers literally used their teeth. Yeah, their teeth. I'll give you a second to picture that. And once you've already crossed that line, cooking up the leftovers didn't seem like much of a leap. And so lamb fries were born. Basically, it's testicles on a plate, fried up, served with sides. In this case, Rockstar puts it with green peas and boiled potatoes. Back then, settlers used every part of an animal out of necessity. Waste nothing, eat everything. Testicles included. Over time, though, it went from survival food to novelty. All across rural Nevada, Oklahoma, Texas, and Kentucky, people still hold actual festivals for this. Yeah, whole fairs dedicated to fried testicles. You think gamers get hyped for DLC? These folks throw a ball, literally. Now roll that into Red Dead Redemption 2. You step into Smithfield's saloon in Valentine, and right there on the menu, lamb fry with peas and potatoes. $5. Peach cobbler with cream. For this, you have to ride into Blackwater, step into the saloon, and after a long day of gunfights, bounty hunting, or just getting chased by a pack of wolves, what do you see on the menu? Peach cobbler with cream. $3. Now, that sounds good, right? Not weird, not gross, just good old-fashioned dessert. And most people think peaches are all American. Nope, they're originally from China, carried into Persia, and then introduced to Europe after Alexander the Great stomped through and brought them back. The Romans even called them the Persian apple. Later, in Middle English, it turned into pesh, which sounds a lot like what we call it today. Now, cobbler, that's where America really left its mark. It's a deep dish fruit dessert with a biscuit crust thrown on top. The first real mention of cobbler shows up in 1839 in the Kentucky Housewife. Mrs. Lettice Bryan wrote about something called peach pot pie, and even then, people were calling it cobbler, which originally meant shoemaker. Then it meant to put something together clumsily, which honestly describes cobbler perfectly. It's pie's messy cousin.
Prairie Chicken. For this one, we have to rewind to the mid-1800s. We're talking wide open prairies, tall grasses rolling forever, oak savannas stretching out in the distance. And right in the middle of it all, prairie chickens. These birds were everywhere. They fed on seeds, fruits, insects, basically nature's buffet. And when settlers rolled in around 1854, they quickly realized these things taste pretty good. The problem? Prairie chickens were tough. They fly fast, low to the ground, and they're not exactly easy targets. But if you were persistent, you could bag a few and put food on the table. And for early settlers, that meant survival. Now fast forward into Red Dead Redemption 2. You step into the Blackwater Saloon, glance at the menu, and right there it is. Prairie chicken with green beans, mashed potatoes, and gravy. Price tag, $5. Half of you are going to read that menu and still just order whiskey. But for the few of us that grab the prairie chicken, that's frontier fine dining. Chilli. Tumbleweed Saloon, out in New Austin. Dust everywhere, horses parked outside, sun baking your hat. You sit down, check the menu, and what do you see? Chili, $3. Now listen, chili isn't just a meal in Red Dead Redemption 2. It's the cowboy's ultimate comfort food. Back in the mid to late 1800s, cattle drives stretched across Texas, and every chuck wagon had one staple, chili. Peppers and onions grew wild along the trails, so cooks leaned on those. Beef was too valuable to just toss in the pot, so a lot of the time, cowboys were getting beans as their main protein. You'd mix your chili with beans on a tin plate and call it dinner. Some trail cooks even got clever. They planted peppers, oregano, and onions in little mesquite patches along the route. And with the passage of time, chili made its way into Texas prisons. Inmates were served chili on the regular. It was basically Gruel 2.0, tough beef hacked into tiny bits, boiled with peppers and spices until it was chewable. But somehow, it actually became famous. Prisoners would rate the jails by how good the chili was, and when guys got released, some even wrote back asking for the prison chili recipe. Imagine that. You walk free, and the thing you miss most? Prison chili.
Roast beef. This dish has been carrying cultural baggage for centuries. Back in England, roast beef was the national meal. They even wrote a ballad in 1731 called The Roast Beef of Old England, a whole song dedicated to meat. And it stuck so hard that the French gave the English a nickname, Les Roast Beef, which, let's be honest, is both an insult and a compliment at the same time. King Henry VII, late 1400s, his guards were called beef eaters. Why? Well, one story says they could eat as much roast beef as they wanted when they dined with the king. So, yeah, the royal perk was basically unlimited meat. Roast beef traditions spread out everywhere after that. In New York, the beef on weck sandwich popped up in the late 1800s, and in England, the Sunday roast became so normal that it's still a thing today. Now, hop back into Red Dead Redemption 2. You roll into Tumbleweed Saloon in New Austin, and on the menu, roast beef with corn and glazed carrots. Price tag, $5. That's a king's meal on a cowboy's table.
Oatmeal.
Here is your oatmeal, sir.
I need a beer too.
Arthur Morgan's out here robbing trains and gunning down Pinkertons, and Rockstar says, here you go, warm oats in a bowl. But to get it, you have to come to Keen's Saloon in Valentine. And from where Rockstar gets this, well, for it, we have to rewind back. 1851, Akron, Ohio. A German immigrant named Ferdinand Schumacher sets up a tiny grocery store. Back home in Germany, he ate oats for breakfast. But in Ohio, locals only fed oats to animals. So basically, he looked around and thought, wait a second, people are eating bacon and eggs while horses are eating oats? Something's off here. So he starts experimenting. By 1854, he's chopping oats into 1-ounce square blocks, selling them in glass jars. Why? Because it cooked faster, and home cooks loved the convenience. Boom. Suddenly, oats weren't just horse food anymore. Then the Civil War hit in 1861. The Union Army needed a cheap, easy way to feed soldiers. And yeah, their horses too. Who did they turn to? Schumacher. Demand for his oats skyrocketed. By 1863, the guy opened the Empire Barley Mill. That's where he really hit it big, creating rolled oats. Husked, steamed, flattened, toasted. The same basic oats we're still eating today. So next time you're sitting in Valentine slurping oatmeal for a measly $3, you're actually eating the dish that fed Union soldiers, helped build an American food empire, and outlasted almost every other Wild West meal.